Wait, welcome to the X podcast. I am here with my friends, Morgan, Tim. Hey. How we doing?
Hello, hello.
You both, I don't know when this is going to come out, but you both have a post-Memorial Day glow. You have bronzed like an Egyptian god and goddess, like just tan. What'd you do? Did you have fun?
Oh, yeah. We were at the pool, cooking out. Actually, we had a crab
I like how
boil.
you almost sang the word pool.
I know.
The pool.
It's glorious.
I love it.
It's exciting.
I saw you. I was at a pool too.
A little pool party.
And you were there as well. So
I was there. You did 27 cannonballs.
Did I really?
In the castle's pool.
7.
That was fun to watch.
Yeah. You have to know by now whenever he talks, he's usually either lying or maybe not.
Man.
So it's hard to tell.
Take that for what's worth, all your listeners and
I actually
viewers.
didn't do any cannonballs.
You didn't?
No.
No, you just kind of
I just floated around the pool,
laid
laid
out,
out.
showed off the new muscles, and I understand.
What new muscles?
The new
Listen to some Harry Styles and just let the wind blow through the breeze.
Okay.
So today...
We're already off track.
We're already off track. This opening line needs a fresh new rendition, but there's a lot going on in the world.
Oh, my God.
The dark side... Again, I'm not sure when this will air, but we just did a podcast talking about, the tragedy in Uvalde. And on the tails of that, since that shooting, there's been over 15. Not one or two more.
I saw that. It was
15 more mass shootings. 12 alone on Memorial Day weekend. 12, at least 12 mass shootings through Memorial Day weekend.
That seems like a lot. Like more than normal.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Right?
Yeah.
Is that more than normal?
I would say so.
Wouldn't it?
I mean, there's...
based on how many there are yearly, that seems like extremely high.
I mean, we have a lot, but that does seem even more than typical.
It's crazy.
So much, and the feedback from our last episode so far has been really good. We still would love to hear more people's thoughts. So just we say this usually at the end, but email us. So much going on. We want to hear your thoughts. We want to hear how you're processing, even what you agree and disagree with, how we're processing at podcast@thex.church. But there, speaking of controversy, has been something really big that's been brewing and has been talked about over the last month and a half. And we've just been looking for the right moment and approach to be able to have a conversation about it. And we're not going to... Tim is struggling with his mic.
Sorry.
We're...
I didn't mean to distract you.
Yeah.
From that real serious moment.
Yeah,
I was having problems.
Yes.
Sorry.
But... long story short, there was... We brushed by it a few
We
weeks
talked
ago.
about it when it first came out, when there was a leak.
Yes, but there was an unprecedented leak about an unprecedented decision, potential overturning of Roe v. Wade.
Yeah, by the Supreme Court, U.S. Supreme Court.
Yes.
And so we're going to have a conversation about it. We want to throw out a few qualifiers. Number one, we know... So many polarizing topics over the last few years.
Yeah. And
this may be at the top. It's a really, really contentious issue. And, I feel like a large chunk of the country right now looks at this as one of the highest moral victories we've had in the last half century. Of what they look at as the potential ending of a modern day genocide.
Yeah.
And the protecting of the unborn. And could there be anything more important than that? And then another large chunk of our society, perhaps even more, look at this as one of the greatest, most dangerous blows to rights for women.
Right.
And taking us back 27 steps in taking away women's right, and that women have a reason right now to be afraid and to be angry. And so there is a deep divide. That's qualifier one, is we understand that. And the truth is, even though in this podcast, and other qualifiers, the three of us, cards on the table, are followers of Jesus who work at a church. And we're in a faith context. We also approach these conversations with the understanding and the assumption that people listening in, watching in, are on both of those camps and in between.
Right.
And so people are going to be watching in from all, and so we try to make space in the conversation for wherever somebody's coming from.
Yeah.
And then one last qualifier, because there's a lot to this, before we just kind of just process. And none of us are experts on this, but we're just processing. Is this deeply political issue is really a deeply personal issue.
Yeah.
And there are going to be people probably watching and listening. And I have several women in my life that have walked through the pain of an abortion.
Right.
One of them would say she's deeply repentant and there's a redemption story. Another one would say there's shame involved, but she's conflicted when she looks back. And so I'm sure there's people watching that have been through the pain. And so our posture towards whoever's listening, whatever they believe, whatever they've been through, whatever they've walked through, is always a posture of love and grace and God's love that can reach them no matter what they've been through, walked through. With all that said, I want to talk, there's layers to this. There's the constitutional layer. There's the practical ramifications of if this turns out to be a done deal. And then, of course, there's all the moral and spiritual pro-life, pro-choice. But first off, I just want to get y'all's first impressions of what happened. I mean, when you heard the news, were you shocked? What'd you first think? What went through your mind?
I was very surprised that it was being considered, especially under, I guess, a more liberal government that we're under right now. So it was very surprising. And
liberal as far as?
As far as President Biden, I would say. I don't know. That makes...
Well, because the
Supreme Court is then has a conservative bent. There's more conservative judges.
Okay, so then that does
Donald Trump put two of them into office, one of them at the very end that swung the...
Okay.
So we actually have a more conservative Supreme Court.
All right. Well, then
the rest of it, though, is a more liberal government.
Right.
Surprising that it's even being talked about.
Yeah.
I didn't know that it was even being discussed.
Me neither. We kind of thought it was a done deal.
It's kind of been a done deal for how long? 50 years?
Since 1973?
70.
I mean, almost?
Yeah.
50 years?
Wow.
Yeah.
I'd say I was shocked because I never thought this would happen.
No.
My entire life, this has been, that it has been a legal thing from a national level. And we were just talking about this too. I think understanding what this means.
Right.
This is the Supreme Court overturning a national level law or constitutional right.
Right.
Isn't that what you said?
Yes.
Constitutional right, which just means then it resorts down to the states.
Right.
So this doesn't, depending on where you live, this may not change anything.
Right.
I feel like it likely won't.
Yeah, I think it needs to. I think a couple things need to be clarified. Number one is that it's not a done deal. It's a probable deal. It's not a done deal. And number two, and this, people that are extremely pro-choice, this is not a comfort. I understand, but if for accuracy's sake, at a purely constitutional level, this is not the Supreme Court siding against abortion.
Right.
Or against the right to abortion.
Right.
This is from a purely constitutional level them saying, no, we're putting that decision in the hands of the states.
Yeah.
And we'll let democracy run its course.
Right.
That's really, that's what's happening.
So it may not change depending on what state you live in. Like it may still be legal, right?
So
it could be illegal based
probably
on
be about half and half.
I have some fun facts for you.
Yeah.
Okay.
So if this happens, if it gets overturned, in the state of Alaska, you will still be able to have an abortion, a legal abortion, up until the moment of birth.
Wow.
However, in the state of Tennessee, that life will be protected from the moment of conception.
Whoa.
So
that's the span.
Wow. Yes.
That's the span.
States on each side.
It is. I'm kind of shocked and not shocked.
I thought Alaska was more conservative.
Does Google lie?
I mean, Google doesn't lie.
No,
Wikipedia.
I actually
No,
think they're
was it?
not.
Yeah.
Maybe I'm thinking about Sarah Palin, and I've put the whole state under Sarah Palin
as a governor. But one of the in a previous one we were talking about the law, the gun legislation law that was put in effect after Sandy Hook, or where they were put to vote. One of the 5 Democrat leaders that voted down was someone from Alaska, but I didn't even realize that they had Democratic. They mostly had Democrat-led people in Congress. Yeah, now, I agree. I was thinking the same thing, but I tell you what, it's really hard for me. I think there's a lot of nuance to this conversation if you remove faith from it. Let's just remove the real strong conservative bent that is there to protect life, because, and coming from a faith perspective, because we believe that life is intrinsically valuable because we are made in the image of God, and there's something different about human life than maybe other species. At least that's how some would see it. That there's something that is just that is to be protected. And I mean, it is interesting. again, I don't want to get into I want to say not irony, but the whole thing about the gun control and that, because we talked about that in other ones. But I mean, we've made it really hard that you cannot end someone's life at the end of it, like as in what's the term? Euthanasia and things like that. Like, it's really hard. Even in this country, you can't get doctors to legally do that. It has to run its course, and so you can see that stamp on it even at the end of life. And I think if I understand that perspective, and maybe a perspective I come from and you come from, but I want to remove that for a moment in conversation. I think just alone, like you said, the different states' approach to this really just highlights the complexity of when does a fetus become a life, a human life versus a fetus versus, like, we were talking before, I was like, is there a heartbeat in this? So I think in Ohio we have the heartbeat law. I think that the heartbeat bill, I think that was passed, right? Like a couple years ago, a year ago or something.
In the last few years.
And so that basically, if there's a heartbeat and they determine there's a heartbeat, you can't abort the fetus. And so it's interesting to see from conception all the way to, I will just come out and say, I think that my wife works as a NICU nurse, and she is taking care of babies that have survived, that were born premature from as early as probably 23, 24 weeks.
Yeah.
So we're talking about like just barely past halfway point, and they're little. We're less than a pound or so. Fit on your hand. I mean, I can't imagine what that's like. And most of them don't, but some do survive. 25, 26 weeks, 27 weeks. But I mean, there are babies that are born early at 36 weeks, 37 weeks, and they don't go to the NICU, and they're perfectly fine and fully developed. And the thought of being able to abort a baby, I'm not saying I agree with it at any point, but I'm just saying it just seems really barbaric at the point of like literally up to 40 weeks.
Agreed.
Now, again, this is, if we're speaking in terms of nuance, this is not me saying this justifies anything.
Right.
But the stats would show that most of the time, if a baby is aborted late term, as horrific as that is, it was due to a last minute emergency medically with the mom that would lose their life, in which they think, okay, if they go on with this, there's going to be something wrong with the baby and the mom's going to lose her life. Again, I am not throwing that out as a justification.
Right.
But I think if we're going to dive into the conversation, we have to put all of that on the table.
Oh, sure.
That's what the argument would be.
And these are arguments. I mean, they're why people, like I said, remove faith from it. That's an argument. And that just is, and I understand that. And I think there are parents with children that are born with issues. They're born with either genetic abnormalities or things like that would say that, I'm grateful for my child regardless of and I understand why some might not. Again, that's what I'm trying to, I think it's important just in the conversation for us to be able to, any of us to be able to understand where someone comes from, whether you're someone that doesn't have a faith context, or maybe it's just science to you. Understand why maybe somebody, when you go, I don't understand, why do they want to take away my right? Well, I don't know that they want to take away your right. It could be that they actually believe that child has value, and just because it's not out of the womb yet doesn't mean that it's not still a human being and has value. And then I think vice versa, the same thing with someone on a conservative side. We'll just say conservative in this conversation, at least. Doesn't always have to be politically, but that would see it from from a different side, and would kind of look at it, and this person would say, vice versa, like, why are you taking away my right versus
No, it's so important. Because here's the truth: none of us and nobody listening is unfamiliar with the black and white arguments of both sides.
Right.
So we probably won't move the conversation too far down the field.
And we've been talking
by parroting this.
This has been talked about for 50
while.
Years. I mean, it's not a new one.
We're not going to solve it today.
We're not going to solve. Hey, as we've said before, here let's acknowledge the limitations of a conversation at the table, but let's also not minimize it.
Yeah.
We won't solve things here, but hopefully the goal is we can contribute. Conversations have lifted my perspective before.
Yep.
And changed my heart and changed my mind.
Absolutely.
And if nothing else, conversations it's great to have deep convictions,
Yeah.
but you can continue to deepen your convictions while also broadening your empathy and your mindset.
Yep.
Yeah.
And so part of it is almost trying to not back at this table, not back up from what I believe, but almost take the hat off of my convictions
Yep.
and almost back up and say, okay, from a societal standpoint,
Yeah.
how can we move the ball down the field?
Yeah.
And I think you mentioned it in passing, but there are a lot of ironies of this and the gun issue. And then even one thing I was thinking about, last week, to probably the chagrin of some on the right, I mentioned that compared to the rest of the world, we are extreme when it comes to the lack of limitations we want on our guns.
Yeah.
But on the other side, on the left, a lot of people that are on the left that would tout Europe and modern progressive, we're also extreme
in abortion
on the on how little we want there to be regulation on abortion.
Yep.
So it is interesting how we pick and choose our comparisons.
It's harder to get an abortion in Europe, in different places, different countries, than it is in America.
There are very few exceptions of any countries that are more extreme than America when it comes to complete unfettered access from conception to birth of what you can do to end a child's life.
Yeah.
I just think we got to acknowledge
Isn't it funny, though, when you say it out loud and you realize, like, America is full of extremes.
Full of extremes.
Like, you go other places
extremes.
and you realize on all of these things, like, we just land on one extreme or the other, and there's not a lot of conversation where to meet in the middle.
And for whatever it's worth, because we mentioned even just, there's so much to, we could have episodes on episodes to even talk about. Like, I was talking to somebody that's really familiar with the justice system and just almost an expert on everything going on with the Supreme Court. And I asked them, I was like, were you shocked? And they said, I absolutely actually was not shocked that this happened. I was shocked that it was leaked.
Oh, yeah.
And people that are on the extreme left don't like that because they're like, oh, okay, that's not what you should be upset about. You should be upset about the taking away of rights. But it is worth, on whatever side you're on, because of the, the temperament set moving forward. That's a big deal. That is unprecedented. And surely was agendaed either by a judge or a judge talking to an intern or whoever saying, hey, we release this. That's worth a whole other episode's worth. There's the whole constitutional level. I told you, I won't say who it was, but there's somebody that's really close to me that's just annoyingly brilliant. They're finishing up this week their PhD in educational law and in political science. And so and we're different. This person is not a believer. They're an atheist. But a couple times a year, I love to just sharpen my mind against this person and ask, he's smiling, to sharpen my mind. And so I asked them, I said, I want to know their thoughts on the constitutional thing. And this person, by the way, is pro-choice. And they're pro-choice with what moderation. They call themselves the Bill Clinton pro-choice. What did Bill Clinton say? Bill Clinton believed abortion should be safe, legal, and rare. And so this person would consider themselves pro-choice with nuance. But I asked them about the constitutional thing, and they said, honestly, even though I am pro-choice, they said, if you actually have an expertise in law and you look at this document that was leaked compared to Roe v. Wade, this document that was leaked is actually way more constitutionally accurate.
Wow.
Now, that doesn't solve the debate. That's anecdotal.
Wait. Say that
So
again.
his argument was
an opinion.
His argument was that Roe v. Wade. Yeah, but there's arguments laid out in that.
Okay, the arguments. Yes.
And his based on he's got some expertise in law.
Yeah.
And his thing was, if you look at Roe v. Wade, even though that has become a standard,
it's precedent.
It has become a precedent. His argument, even though he's pro-choice,
not a better
is actually pretty thin.
Yes,
and is actually pretty flimsy, and actually wasn't very constitutionally anchored.
Yeah.
Again, that's anecdotal. That doesn't solve anything. But there's just so much to this.
Well, I figured though, for even for these justices, for something that's been precedents for 50 years, regardless of their
but there are exceptions,
but their personal convictions to. I said this before when we mentioned it. For them to overturn it, there has to be something significant legally.
Well, that's what
for them to put it in there. I have not read though. I don't know if I pieces. So I will admit.
I think they just looked.
Pieces.
I think they just looked from a constitutional standpoint and said, "No, this should have never been in the hands of the federal government. It should be in the hands of the states."
I think that's what it is.
I don't even know if there was a trigger. I just think they looked at it and said, "No, this isn't constitutional," because it is the job of the Supreme Court.
Right.
To assess whether something's constitutional or not, regardless of what they believe.
Right. So,
anyway,
that may
that's
be the right thing legally in the eyes of, you
Right.
look of law
Yeah.
and justice, maybe the right thing legally for them to do, but it's created a firestorm, obviously, because
We're
it's an
talking about it
emotional,
again.
it's
Oh,
an
yeah.
emotional issue. And I do think maybe it is worth another one at some point to talk about. It's not related to that, but the process, how it's played out, I think is actually really awful for our
Yes.
country and our Constitution and other things. When you look at the fact that not only was this leaked, but then there are people who leaked the addresses
Yeah.
of the homes where
Yeah.
the justices live.
Oh, they already have
they're-
security
and
details.
and there's crowds of people out there, and they're threatening them. Like, how does that affect
Yeah.
future decisions?
Right.
And how does that affect future judges
Yeah.
that go in there? Like, to know that, you know, you and your family or other people would be at risk for decisions that you, I mean, that's a, let's just be honest, that's a really, really hard seat to sit in.
Yeah.
I would not want to sit in that seat, to be honest with you.
neither.
That is a hard, you have to make some really hard judgments. Granted, you're not doing it on your own.
Right.
And that's why you have an odd number, but large
Yes.
number, so you can. But that would be such a hard thing to be in. And to have those things stripped away, to me, is a danger to
Yeah.
us having a really good process
Yeah.
for stuff. So there's
I-
a lot. I just, it's pretty bad.
I'm going to put you on the spot, Morgan.
Yeah.
Obviously, a lot of this is it's personal, it's political, it's spiritual, it's agendaed, and it's also a very highly gendered issue.
It is.
And so, I mean, I've seen. You knew there would be a backlash and an outrage. Again, precedents aren't permanent, but they usually remain.
yeah.
There are exceptions, but I didn't see it coming, and I knew there'd be outrage. But I mean, there are people quoting what's the Netflix or Hulu series, the show *Handmaid's Tale*.
Oh.
That are, I mean, it's to me feels extreme.
Yes.
But there's everything from moderate anxiety to deep frustration to outrage to, I mean, I'm reading New York Times articles about women holding their little girl weeping, saying, "I'm afraid of your future." So,
Yeah.
not to put you on the spot, but I know you don't speak for all women.
I don't.
But as a woman, how did this hit you? How are you processing? And how do you process the argument from that side from women who would say this is an attack on women?
Okay. So
That's a lot. Sorry.
Yeah, that's a lot. That's okay. I think it's safe to say on both sides, emotions are high. People feel and I'm an emotional person. I'm a feeler. Just sitting here talking to you two, I'm like, okay, I am the feeler of this video
Yeah.
right now. I feel all the emotions.
What are you talking about?
finally
I'm a
in the
massive
middle.
feeler.
And
You're saying I'm not a feeler? What's wrong with
Wing 3.
yeah.
Oh, my gosh.
I'm bringing the Enneagram back. Anyway, I feel like for women. So one of the first things when you asked me to sit in this seat today, I did was I'm going to listen to something. I want to hear from people who support abortions and who have had abortions, and I want to hear what they have to say. And because I want to feel what they're feeling, I want to understand why they feel the way that they feel. So listening to these women speak of their abortions, to me, being a woman of faith, it was clear that they did not have a foundation of faith. And I feel like that's kind of, for me, that's where I come from, and that's how I kind of make my decisions.
Like
and
you're saying, you don't
how-
feel like they have that their arguments are pulling from a spiritual
Correct.
Christian
They were
framework.
They were very different situations. One woman, was in
Because someone said they have
college.
faith in the universe or faith in
Yeah.
whatever, but
I mean, they didn't go into that much detail, but they were all individual, different stories. Some, were violently attacked and raped, and ended up conceiving a baby. Some were it was an oops. There was even a woman who was in her 40s, had a 10-year-old and a 13-year-old, and didn't want any more kids. So she decided to get an abortion, and she has no regrets. She has no regrets, and just trying to understand and just hear different perspectives, because I want to understand where they're coming from and why.
Yeah.
Did it change my mind? No. I think life is precious. As a woman of faith, I feel like life is it's precious and it's to be protected. Another person I follow, and I don't get all of my views from her. Her name is Abby Johnson.
I know. I think my daughter follows her.
Yes.
Is it Matt and Abby? Is that the same, or is this someone else?
No.
Oh, maybe not then.
So Abby Johnson, she is a former director of Planned Parenthood.
Oh, wow.
Oh, okay.
And I think she worked there for 8 to 9 years. And she was, she went into it because she wanted to care for women. And I think
Right.
a lot of women, we want to care for each other.
Yeah.
We want to build each other up. We want to be there for each other. We don't want to be arguing over, this kind of stuff. So she came, I believe, with a good heart, wanting to care for women. And she realized after being there for years that Planned Parenthood was more, they were selling abortions. It wasn't to help women. And then this pivotal moment in her career as a director at Planned Parenthood, she was brought in to a ultrasound guided abortion. And trying to spare you some of the details, she essentially watched a 13-week-old fetus fight for its life at 13 weeks in utero, ultimately losing that battle. And she just left feeling like, oh my gosh, what am I doing? Just completely horrified watching the life being taken. And I feel like a lot of times we look at abortion, it's just a word. It's just a word. It's just something that happens. It's a quick answer to a problem that I'm having, and it'll go away. But if we really look at, I'm getting into my faith now, sorry. If we really look at the life that has been created, the life that is already existing, and we're taking that, in my opinion, selfishly. I know that there are situations, and nothing enrages me more when I hear about a young woman being attacked and, raped, brutally. Like, that enrages me, especially young women. Like my chest is probably getting red right now with rage, and that is awful. And I know a lot of people fight this, and I might get some flack for this, but to me, the trauma has already happened. When that happens, you're already traumatized. Like, there's no going back from that. But I believe that life is a beautiful thing, and perhaps this life that has been created out of this traumatic event is worth keeping and worth protecting, and perhaps that life is going to save another life. I also have personal connection. I have a couple people in my life, very close people in my life, who have been a part of a unexpected creation of life, if you will. And they had pivotal moments of their life where they may have been here, they may have not been here. And in some of these cases, I have 2 that I can think of off the top of my head. The creators of the life would tell you right now that life saved their own life. Their paths were not going down a great path. They were making bad decisions, but because this life unexpectedly created saved theirs, because they were like, you know what, we need to get ourselves together because we're no longer living for us. We're going to start living for this, unexpected created life.
Yeah. And to be clear, because me and you talked earlier,
Yes.
and I know this is a very emotional part for you, so I'm not going to dig in, but some people really meaningful to you were almost aborted.
Correct.
Yeah.
Yeah. And
that's going to shape how you feel.
right.
Yeah.
And like I said, I'm a feeler, so
Yeah.
I'm already pulling tears. I'm sorry.
Okay. It's okay.
Okay, so let me press against what you said is beautiful, and there's a lot of people I know watching that will resonate with that, but just to push a little bit.
Push away.
Like, to women that, because there's a lot of people that would say, okay, maybe I believe what you believe, but I still think women should have a choice. Because what about the women that don't believe like you believe?
Yeah.
What do you feel or think about the argument that this is taking away a woman's right? Because I feel like I was talking to somebody the other day, and people may disagree with this, but I was talking to actually a pro-choice person about this, and the pro-choice person said, at the end of the day, they don't think this is about women's rights. This is about the argument of when does life begin? Because if life begins at conception, if it does, then you're in this circular argument, and I feel like this is where a lot of people get trapped, because it's like, well, then it's murder. But at the same time, this is happening inside of a woman's body, so it's a woman's right to do with their body, and don't they have a choice? But then again, you're also fighting for the choice of hundreds of thousands of little women's right to live. So it's like this, it turns into this, and I think that's why I think it's going to be an argument, until the end of time. But what do you do with the argument that this is stripping away a woman's choice?
Okay. Yes.
I'm putting all the heavy stuff on you.
I mean, Johnny Depp,
I'll
Amber
just sit
Heard.
back and enjoy. I'll sit back and listen to you talk. This is great.
Here we go. I do understand women wanting a choice, and when I remove my faith from someone, I feel like woman to woman, I would so much rather than championing abortion and like the right to our body, like why are we not gathering around each other? Like, okay, you have an unexpected pregnancy, but I'm going to rally around you. Can we remove the shame from an unexpected pregnancy? I feel like that is one of the problems why women, because they do feel ashamed. You know, I'm not married. I haven't graduated college, and I'm just not ready.
Or high school.
Or high school, yeah. And it can be a very scary thing. And I understand that. And I understand wanting to take the easy way out, you know. And I feel like that's what it is. I feel like in most cases, it's an easy way out. It's a quick solution to a problem that you feel you may have. Back to your question.
But legally, shouldn't that be up to the woman?
I agree. I feel like, in a way, yes, it should be. Removing my faith, I believe it should be up to the woman.
Does that add another?
I'm making you uncomfortable now.
Does this add another layer of complexity when you have a woman that does want an abortion and the man who was part of it that doesn't?
Right.
I mean, and it's her body that carries that baby. Those situations happen.
I heard a spiritual leader say this that would probably be crucified
common.
for saying this, especially in conservative circles. But I heard a spiritual leader that said, "Look, I want every baby to have a right to live, but the way you help people make better choices is not by taking away their choices."
Right. I think that's I would agree with that, though. I feel like I would rather see...
Sounds like you're pro-choice.
Sounds like you're Oh, are we ever going to air this?
This is good. No, I feel like, yes, I would much rather come alongside women. I would love to see more organizations. Like, we're putting so much energy into, you know, campaigning, picketing, and like yelling at people going into these, you know, abortion clinics. Like, I would much rather see that energy put into going alongside these women, getting to know them personally. Like, could we start an organization where we get to know these women personally and we can go alongside them and honestly map out?
Well, we have
like,
some, I think. I think PDHC tries to do
I
that.
think
There are
there
some. There are some.
No, PDA is what leads to.
No, stop
babies.
it. Okay.
Well, the number one reason for abortions that's reported is financial.
Yeah.
So a lot of people would say, okay, this is a holistic. Say what?
I have another fun fact.
Go ahead. Yeah.
Okay.
I don't know
So
if these are all fun though.
You have facts.
She's a
facts.
kids
Yeah.
director.
Yeah,
So let's just say that.
Yeah,
So
yeah.
everything's a fun fact.
everything's fun.
So fun fact.
fact.
Most people who are poor have abortions.
Yeah.
So-
Yes. No, my husband just finished the book, The Ruthless
Scary
Elimination.
Oh,
of
hurry,
Greed.
John Mark Comer.
Yes.
Yeah.
Love him.
And
It's a good book.
I haven't read it yet. We have it on Audible. It's on my list to listen to. But he said that if you make over $35,000 or more, you are of the top 3% of the world. And I feel like if you have that perspective, okay, another thing that one of these women on the thing that I listened to who had abortions said that our country is not for families. And I disagree. I feel like our country rallies families. I feel like we have so many government aid. I mean, you can get free health care for you and your child. You can get formula. I mean, there's programs out there.
Not right now, you can't.
Just because we can't get it.
Okay, just because they can't be made. But that's a whole nother podcast. If you heard those conspiracies. But anyway, I feel like we rally around, you know, and I feel like if it's laid out for a woman facing the choice of abortion, like, here are some resources for you. You know, you're going to be okay.
Yeah.
You can do this. And perhaps, you know, this is going to be one of your hardest journeys, but perhaps that's what you were created for, was to create this life, care for this life.
Yeah.
Who may become
So it's almost like
president of the United States.
It's almost like you're saying. I feel like you just switched your position. No, I'm just kidding. No, but I feel like what you're saying. I'm not putting words in your mouth.
It's okay.
Here's the question I have that I'm almost afraid to pose it, because this is me asking questions, not drawing conclusions. This is me understanding that we have a wide variety of people watching.
Right.
Actually, let me preface this. I am a person, my value system is intrinsically high supreme value for life. So like
Right.
I am all about life. I am
Yeah.
pro-life, and I almost don't even like to use that phrase because I feel like it rings hollow nowadays.
Mm-hmm.
Because
Well, it's not just anti-abortion; you're pro-life,
right? So
There's-
so like
there's
when
a
people
difference.
say pro-life, the accusation that comes back a lot of times is one of, I think, understandable accusation of hypocrisy. Oh,
Yeah.
you want them to be born, but you don't want to care for the poor.
Right.
You don't want to care for women. You don't want to care for the disenfranchised. You don't actually help them succeed. You don't. So when I say I'm pro-life, I will say, in my view, I try to be consistent.
Yeah.
I want every unborn child to have the right to live.
Yeah.
And I want to hold in deep value immigrants and women
Yeah.
and
Yes.
people struggling in the middle of social justice
and prisoners,
and
you
prisoners.
might
and
say
I'm
everybody
against
the
and I'm
death penalty,
and I'm-
and they're, that's pro-life,
and I'm
too.
against capital punishment.
Yeah.
So I am like from conception to the grave trying to uphold. I really do believe deeply inside that God is the author of life.
Yeah.
I really do believe that. So I hold highly a value for life.
Yeah.
But the question that I have, especially in a context, we talk a lot of times about what I think is a toxic marrying of Christianity and politics.
Mm-hmm.
Here's a question I just want to pose, and in fact, let me apply this to any issue. Is it possible to hold a absolute conviction on something and not conflate it with the current political construct handed down of which you must address it? In other words,
Yes, I think you can, but I think it's also, I think you can intellectually, but I don't know that we do that in reality.
we don't do it politically.
We don't do it politically, and we don't do it in reality.
But is it? But I even think in reality, I mean, could it be high time? Because I mean, Jesus refused to be pigeonholed into boxes. I mean, you talk about reality. Jesus, they try to say, hey, they all the time, are you in this political system or you believe you're this political person? And Jesus refused to play the games.
Right.
He lived in another dimension. He thought in another dimension. And so I guess my question is, I mean, if you're pro-choice and you listen to this, if you're pro-choice, you listen to this, just because you believe women have the right, does that mean that there are two extreme, in my view, almost two extreme opposing, like political constructs handed down, not extreme in the belief,
Right.
but extreme in the approach, perhaps? Like, if you're pro-choice, do you have to accept the current political pro-choice model handed down? If you're pro-life, do you have to, I'm just asking the question, do you have to accept, there are people, there are spiritual leaders that argue that the church has done such a poor job, and the church in the 80s and 90s getting mixed up and muddled in the moral majority had such harsh authoritarian tones in the way that they spoke to women and the way that they were so judgmental and condemning. Zero human empathy was ever detected for women that were victims of assault or rape or whose lives were in jeopardy.
Yeah.
And they believe that's actually one of the reasons that there's been such an extreme counter-reaction.
people
Like
further.
you talked about the people that don't, that are happy about abortions. You've seen probably the post with this woman that she has a ticker, like 200 abortions and counting, almost boasting,
gosh.
like proud.
Yeah.
And so I guess I'm, again, hear me, like from a faith perspective, I always am going to be on the side of life.
Yes.
I also think that politics should never become the principal way we communicate values.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Or the principal way we fight for hearts.
Yeah.
I've heard somebody say it. Jesus didn't fight for votes; he fought for hearts.
Yeah.
And so I guess that's just the reason I bring that up. And I'm not trying to get don't write me letters. I want
Please
every
do.
Yes.
child to live. I want every baby to have the chance to live.
Yes.
And I think a holistic approach. Let me say it this way: if I'm going to back up from my,
You're saying a lot of things,
Yeah.
but not saying very much right now. You're
No.
trying to, but I know it's hard to put into words.
no, I disagree. I think the questions I'm putting forth are hopefully opening our minds
Yeah.
that we don't need to be put in boxes.
Yes.
Yes.
And that some of these situations may be holistic. And let me say it this way. If I'm going to back up from my pastoral role, Jesus role, if I'm going to try to speak at more of a societal level, just speaking from the reality of how many people believe this versus this, let me just say it this way. If I don't care how dogmatically pro-life you are, I don't care how adamantly pro-life you are, I don't care how just passionate you are about pro-life, if nowhere in your platform and nowhere in your conversation has any room or dialogue about a concern for women's rights or a concern, an empathy, a human compassion for women that are victims of assault or their bodily functions, you're never going to make ground in people's hearts. And on the left, I don't care how pro-choice you are. I don't care how adamantly dogmatic you are about women's rights. If nowhere in your conversation has any dialogue about the value of human life, has any dialogue about the horrific realities of late-term abortion, has no dialogue about the dignity of all the unborn children that are never given a chance to live, and you know, in every generation, generations look back on atrocities and say, how do we let that happen? Could it be possible people are going to look back on this generation and say there was a genocide under our watch of unborn? And so my point is, if no matter what side you're on, I just say this because I know we have different people listening, if nowhere in your conversation has any understanding, like I'm going to pick on pro-choice again for a minute. The marketing, I'll give this for pro-choice. The marketing is brilliant. It's a right for the reproductive health of women. What I remember the first time I heard that, I was like,
well, of course.
What a clever, brilliant phrase. Startlingly absent from that phrase is any mention of the baby.
Right.
Any mention of life, any mention of the psychological effects that could happen to the woman.
Right.
No mention of the little woman that might not have a chance to live.
Right.
But that phrase, and so I just say that because there's someone I really respect that's highly pro-choice. I saw a tweet the other day, and they said this is about women's health and rights. Plain and simple, period. And I thought to myself, no, it's not that plain and simple. If it was that plain and simple, we would not be. I think I even heard, I'm just going to ramble. I think it was Bill Burr, the atheist comedian who is pro-choice. I think it was actually him that I heard make this statement. He said, you've got to understand, if someone thinks that something's murder, they're going to fight for it. So if you're pro-choice, no matter how pro-choice you are, this is not trying to change your mind, but at least maybe for understanding when you're in conversations, at least just, I know this is simple, we know this, but consider the fact. If a great majority of people in the country believe it's murder, wouldn't it be unethical for them not to fight to stop it?
Right.
Like, wouldn't it make it wrong for them not to strive to? So anyways, I just think we're not going to solve this debate. But on both sides, there's got to be bridges of empathy built, bridges of intelligence and compassion and understanding built, because the extremes are used for both sides as well. Like on the extreme pro-choice, they'll say, "What about women with, in terms of incest and rape and violation?" That's absolutely valid, and that's absolutely heartrending, and that actually does bring complexity to the situation, but. The statistics are that is actually microscopically low.
I think.
Less than 1%. Now, there's the argument, well, maybe some of them don't want to speak out. Sure, you can create a little margin for that.
Sure.
But the truth is, that's a microscopic exception. But on the right, what did the right do? Same thing. But what about the horrific realities like term abortion? Which that's true, but again, that's a microscopic low portion. So both sides use the extreme anecdotes on both sides to make a point.
Right.
And I just don't think it moves the conversation forward.
For sure. I feel like you just kind of summed up how I feel, because I did go back and forth, and you mentioned how Jesus would not take sides. So therefore, I also do not take a side. I have compassion and I have love for all. End scene.
End scene, you're done?
No.
It's good.
What are you thinking?
Yeah.
Oh, you just said it all. What do you mean? What do I say?
Thinking? Am I crucified over that?
No. Why would you be crucified over it?
I don't know. I
don't think it's. I think there is a national argument that people will. I think if you remove the legal aspect, there's a national argument that people are just always going to have, and because we. It's like all those points you made.
Yeah.
All true. They still don't address us practically. How do we do this in a way that I wanted to say, again, I want to remove what my personal view is. How do we as a nation, let's put us against all the other nations in the world and some of the irony that we talked about earlier. How do we as a nation, I want to say this, is if we're going to allow abortions, how do we do it in a responsible manner? I know that almost seems counterintuitive, but how would we do that? In other words, would there be situations where we would say up until a certain, or like, again, I think certain states have tried. Ohio, Texas, some of them have tried. Texas has changed their most recent, but Ohio with the heartbeat is like, hey, the moment there's a heartbeat detected, then you can't abort the child. You know, and so now some people will say, and I've heard the argument that that's not a big enough window, that by the time you find out, by the time you, especially with COVID and all this, by the time you try to schedule, by the time you try to, because you're also not allowed to get one on your first visit. So you go in for an appointment and you go see them. That there's, I think, laws that require you to come back at least one more time, if not two more times, one more time, and then schedule it. And so that argument is like, hey, even if you, by the time you find out, because there's a time in your cycle when you ovulate, which is the only time when you can get pregnant. So then you're going to still have weeks before you're going to find out. And then you kind of find out, and then you go to the go to see the one, and then so some of them are arguing that that's not enough time for someone to make a decision, and then a woman can't actually. How is a woman? Again, I'm removing any kind of like personal conviction or a faith argument. I'm just saying, practically speaking, legally, how one of the arguments that was against when Texas changed their bill was that women are now going to be rushing into making a decision to possibly get an abortion, because if they don't get it done within this window, then it's too late. And so that they actually think that it's going to cost, some people using, again, political different sides, or say it could increase the number because women won't have time to actually be able to process and think, do I really want to keep this child or not keep the child? So I'm just saying there's so many different.
And there's the practical argument that it'll be forced into a black market.
Absolutely. You go back behind the scenes, and you got back to the old picture of the coat hangers and the dark alley abortions, and because people are going to find a way to do it. And it's kind of, it's the same. It's kind of the same argument. They're very different, but I just want to say it's kind of like the whole thing with the guns. Like you do legislate one form of it, people are going to find another way probably to do it. It doesn't mean you don't try to make it harder for people to get certain things. Okay, we talked about all that, and so I think like what you said, the passionate, how people feel, I agree. I think I am for women and their rights, and I want to be for. And so for the unborn babies. And so it's really hard.
So where does that meet?
That's what I'm saying. That's where I think we have to be able to find some kind of common ground in reality, in practical. Okay, we can sit around in theories and ideas, and I'm for this and against this all day long. My personal opinion, I'm for women and their right. And I am for the unborn. And so where does that meet? And that's why I guess I would say that this issue is intensely complex. Of all the reasons I just started talking about, it just gets, and then it's what group of people, what people, the people under a poverty line are majority of the abortions. And so it's really hard to it's really hard to just sit there and just cast out judgments, and this is the way it should be for everybody in the country. I think that's a really hard thing to do. And so I guess I sit here and say I think in the way I think is enough empathy to recognize and understand that in the middle of this, it's still really complex. And so I don't know what the answer is. I appreciate the fact that maybe the Supreme Court and the federal government will remove themselves, and it'll be at a state level. I mean, maybe we'll end up in a place where people will potentially, again, I know you'd made, well, maybe people can just move to a different state, and that is hard. So I just want to just pick up and move when the rest of your family's here, your job's here, that's hard to do. I don't want to just say that, but I wonder if you'll see a shifting of people based on kind of red and blue states and where people will end up wanting to live. And I think we're seeing that now over the last couple of years because of COVID. I think it kind of highlighted that there was a mass exodus out of California because people did not want to live under these kind of policies. And so I wonder if we're going to see now, does that bring our nation together? No, probably not. No, I mean, we just end up being more divided and more colorful map. But that might be the reality that we have. And, I think there is some, on the argument of, here's one of the challenges that I have. So and I think we all probably do, it's an internal conflict. So I have an internal conflict in the fact that I am for the unborn.
Yep.
I'm with you. I believe what you said about life and value and what you see it. I'm the same way. I feel like I've even changed in some of my views in the last several years, even to be even more pro-life. And the fact I think I'd be against capital punishment for a variety of different reasons, and I would have never said that probably 5 years ago.
Yeah.
So I do think that we can change in the way we see things.
Yeah.
And
we should evolve.
We should. And I'm for life. I'm for women's choices. And here is where there's an internal conflict. And I'm not a woman, so I don't want to have an opinion where I'm going to sit here and go, this, you shouldn't be able to do this. But the unique situations of, let's just talk about rape, assault, even I want to say rape through incest that would cause it. Here's the crazy thing. Those women didn't have a right to choose that moment either.
Yeah.
Right.
Yeah.
Right? So a woman that is raped and now it's like, that I'm just saying the entire act of what happened was a violation of her right.
Yeah.
Yep.
Yeah.
And so I guess I just have a massive amount of empathy when I think about a situation where a woman lost her right to choose there, and now it also loses her right to choose here.
Yes.
Like that is just a massive conflict that I just, for me, my heart would break for anybody in that situation.
Absolutely.
So it's hard for me to sit here with a moral imperative and go, no, you have to, when they may not believe what I believe about life.
Exactly.
So I'm conflicted, and I also, when I say that, I don't want to be put into a box, as you said.
Yeah.
I don't want to be put into a box because that's what we've done. That's just what happens with political rhetoric. It's like, oh, if you're pro-life, you're against women. No, I'm not. And if you're pro-choice, you're against unborn. You're against life.
And I guess that's what I was trying to say earlier. I think you alluded. Maybe I was trying to be too careful.
Well,
I guess I was trying to say, do we have to conflate our convictions with the political templates to address those convictions?
Right. Well, I don't.
Is it possible to be? Is it possible to say I hold unswervingly to the conviction that God is the author of life and that I want every baby to have the choice to live, and at the same time say, and I don't fit into the polarizing political construct that's been handed down of how to address that?
Right. No, it's a great question, but what I was
because I do know people that feel that way,
no.
and I know that's hard for some Christians to comprehend. I know Christians that love Jesus and would say, "I am against abortion, but I think God always gives us choices." Yeah, and I think God is a God of choice. There are people that view it that way.
I agree. I know that there are people that view it that way, and I.
But on the other hand, to complete your argument, what's crazy is, sorry, not to interrupt. I just when you're talking about it, if your heart doesn't become outraged by a woman's innocence being ripped away, her
just as much.
There's an issue in your heart. Like, we talked about it a few weeks ago, like we're celebrating the steps that have been made in progress for equality for women, but there's still more steps to be taken. And that aside, anybody to have their to be violated or molested, and then to carry this, like to have that choice taken away, but then have the choice taken away of what to do with it. But then here's where it goes full circle. But then somebody goes in and says, but it also wasn't that child's choice.
Sure.
And should that child not be given the chance to live?
No, I agree.
Because, but then how do you address that?
It's complex. Can we just say it's complex? And I think that's obviously, this is the reason why we're polarized as a nation over it. This is the reason why. And I think what isn't helpful, unfortunately, in the party polarization, for votes and everything else, is that we don't have people who come to the table who bring their convictions, but also try to set them aside to understand and try to meet. What I was trying to say is, practically speaking, it would be nice to see if we could somehow meet in the middle.
What does that
look like?
Well,
I think it looks like it could.
Is it a Bill Clinton thing?
Yes, it could look like there's a pro-choice to a point. Okay, there could be. I said, I think Ohio and some of them have tried to. It's to a certain point. Again, you could be out there and you're a pro-life person and go, that doesn't work with me. I understand that doesn't work with you and your perspective, but somebody who doesn't have your same conviction, who is pro-choice, saying it doesn't work with me the other way. And so I just, for policy's sake, I'm saying for real life, practical, I think we've got to land somewhere. So we can just sit around and keep yelling at each other with all of our convictions on either side. Or do we just have some people that could come to the table and go, how do we try to do our best to preserve? Because here's what does happen, and we know, is that further on in a pregnancy, you do have things like your nerve endings, and you do have things developing where late-term abortions, and you have babies who would survive if they were outside of the womb on their own.
Right.
Not with medical whatever. They would survive on their own, who feel it when they go and abort them.
Ugh.
Okay, so I mean, you do have that reality, and then you have, and again, this is where it's hard to defer to science, and it's like, okay, you're a fertilized egg to you become a collection of cells to it develops to an actual heartbeat that is going. Okay, brain like I'm just talking purely scientific in the process, the embryonic process. There's can we at some point, and I don't know how we could do it with science, can we come to an agreement? And again, maybe this is where the Supreme Court is saying, you know what, maybe we can, but that's not for our job or nationally to decide.
Yeah.
But I think there should be somewhere along the line that if we are going to come to the table, that we could do something that would try to, again, I'm not trying to pacify someone else, because that's the problem, is that everybody feels like if you bend, you're pacifying the other side, you're giving, you lose. You're losing your country, you're losing what you've got. It's like, okay, we've lost our country a long time ago, let's just be honest, okay? There has been nothing but cultural wars.
Was it even ours to begin with?
I know. I mean, it's just like I'm just saying we've lost it in a unity, and it's like when you look at just where we are, we're so divided we can't do anything. Nothing is happening. Nothing is getting passed. We're not dealing with any kind of issue of gun legislation and mass shooting like we talked about in a previous one. Nothing is being done about anything because we have these extremes, and they're party led, and we have lobbyists, and we got all these people that are feeding this stuff, and nothing's happening. And so I just wonder if we would remove our faith, we'd remove our convictions, both sides, and come to the table. Can we find something that is, like you said, that's safe, but it's rare? That it's, and again,
just to
I know
clarify for everybody listening, this is not what me and you
No,
are.
this is not necessarily my personal conviction.
Yes.
I'm saying for the sake of
the future.
the future,
what's
the
interesting?
sake of, the sake of children that aren't born, but the sake of women and their rights, that we need to do something. We need to, and so it is complex. Again, this is why we've been arguing.
And
about
what's
for 50
interesting?
years.
You mentioned the science. Like I know some people that again are in the science world and actually tell me there's been an underground movement of in the scientific community, a pro-life movement in the scientific community based on the science of nerve endings and even science they were beginning to dream and all this stuff. But you also you talked about fetus, and it just reminded me. Let's go back to the power of language.
Yep. Quit calling them baby.
The reproductive health of a woman against baby killing.
Yeah.
The baby in the womb, a viable or non-viable fetus.
A clump of cells.
A clump of cells. And so, Morgan, I need you to decide the argument once and for all.
Right here, right now.
When does life begin?
Yeah. Oh.
I already told you when I thought life begins, but
You
Conception?
said conception.
I said conception.
Which is why, let's just say, this is why the Catholic Church, for years and years and years, and I think they've reversed it recently, were against birth control.
Yeah.
Was because, and you can get into argument, are you actually interfering with the potential of life, which is a whole nother,
Because you are.
a whole nother argument, so it's complex. I think we just sit here and it's really hard to wrap up or to resolve or to anything on this kind of conversation. But I think we just want to at least dialogue about it, have a conversation and say wherever you land. And I do think, I agree with you. I think there are a lot more people in circles of faith, in churches, that feel torn between
feel
these
the
for what we just drew out, the tension, the conflict that we feel, which is, I want to be for women and their choice, but I also want to be for the women in their womb that isn't born too, and vice versa. I think we've drawn out that tension and that internal conflict enough, but I actually think that there are a lot more people, even in circles of faith and church, that feel that same conflict, that don't really have a great answer. I think that there has been a really, really, on the conservative side, there's been a really, really big and loud voice about this, and I understand why. like you said, if you're passionate about life and you think people are murdering life and you believe life is at conception, you should be probably vocal about it. But I think in many ways, I wonder if there's a lot more people that aren't vocal about it because they're conflicted.
Yeah.
And they really do love Jesus, and they really do love people, and they really do care about people, and they're also conflicted.
I think if the church, because we're talking on a societal level and a national level and then a church level. And the church, I think if the church, yes, in one hand, lifted their voice. I mean, there are verses in Isaiah that says, lift your voice for the unheard.
Yeah.
And so I know women
Proverbs
that
as well.
you would go, they would even refuse to call it abortion clinics. They would call it, because they said clinics help people, they'd call them abortion mills. Sounds extreme, but they would go, and I knew a group of women in Lexington because there were two main, what they would call abortion mills in Kentucky, one in Louisville, one in Lexington, and they'd go every Friday because they said every Friday, if you knew that people were about to be killed, wouldn't you go?
Yeah.
And they'd go there. But I will say this for them. All of these women came ready and prepared on the spot to adopt the child if the person would listen to them.
Wow.
And they came actually sharing the gospel of God's love for that person.
Yeah.
And actually, and they had scientific facts about, Ray Comfort has all these, documentaries, 180, and like all about how like there's not you don't exit the same way you enter an abortion clinic. And his whole thing is if somebody were to actually watch an abortion, it would forever destroy the myth that it's an acceptable practice. I mean, all these things. But anyways,
probably
but
some truth to that. As you talk about that lady, it's the same conversation we had about racism, that when you see the picture.
Yeah.
That's true.
That it changes things. The same thing, I think, in any of these.
Yeah.
It's true, but... And I don't even know where I was going with that. Other than I just think, if nothing else from this conversation, maybe it gives you some practical handles to understand and engage with the other side.
Yeah.
To actually have conversation. Maybe to have empathy. Maybe to realize, I guess here's what I'm saying, the church.
Yeah.
I think the church, if in one hand, be lovingly bold and unapologetic that God is the author of life.
Yep.
Yeah.
And that God loves people, but be really specific that God loves all people, and be really specific in a radical, humble love for all people, all races, all ideologies, and people from all backgrounds, all lifestyles, and be just radically. The Bible says, "Here's how they'll know you belong to me because of the way you love people."
Yes.
And so, and then on the other hand of this bold but loving stand for life, realize that complex issues usually have holistic answers, and it is fighting not primarily on the front of politics, in my opinion. But I feel like if we're in a fight for hearts, if that's really we're in a fight, a spiritual warfare for hearts and lives. That you can't legislate revival and you can't legislate life transformation.
Yeah.
And our primary field is in loving people. It's in serving the poor.
Yeah.
Let's have holistic solutions to poverty. Let's
Yeah.
have holistic solutions to care. Let's have holistic solutions to rally around women.
Yeah.
Let's have holistic solutions to bring revival to a dark and broken world. Let's have holistic solutions to fight against violence and aggression and rape and assault and victimhood. And then let's be willing to sit down and have intelligent conversations about practical solutions.
Yeah. I also think, just to add to that, I think from a perspective of the church, as you brought the church in this, because I think some of this we wanted to remove the church because this is a conversation nationally and societally.
Be a place of healing for women.
But I think even because that's a context we understand, we know we come from in the church, what you were saying, I it's really complicated too when you even just think about, even look at our faith and you think that God gave mankind the right to choose even if they chose wrong. That God gave, again, I'm not making this an argument for pro-choice. I'm just saying that we see this perspective played out in Genesis. We see that there was a right to choose, even if that meant their own death.
Yeah.
And I wonder, again, we live in a country that there's still remnants of people that hold on to try to say that we're a Christian nation. We haven't been a Christian nation.
Yeah.
I don't think ever. Okay. I don't, it's like, well, the forefathers, go
Yes.
look at the forefathers' lives. And I don't know how many were Christians. Yes, they use some Christian principles that
We
they
come from a
built some
Judeo-Christian
things
framework.
but this idea that I think we have to understand in the church. I think we have to understand that we live in a society that is going to govern itself and lead its people in a certain way. And I think, I think it's good for us to have convictions, but I just wonder if we spent as much time not fighting against in the way it's been done in the past, which, I mean, let's be honest, there's been I remember what it was like in the 80s and 90s. And I mean, it's like church on a regular, like, let's go and picket abortion clinics and things like that. Now, I appreciate what those women were doing. To me, that's different. That's
absolutely.
I want to go there to be there to have a conversation that I'll adopt your baby and I'll do that.
Yeah.
But I've also, when I was a kid, I've been taking abortion clinics and standing there, and and I don't think those signs were awful at the time when I've been there, but that mentality, or there have been some who have gone to abortion clinics to blow them up. Okay, let's talk about let's talk about just hypocrisy,
right?
But I think if the church spent as much energy on trying to love the women. And trying to serve the women, and there are. I don't want to say we aren't, and I want to say there's organizations. We support organizations that do that, but I just think it's the narrative of how the world views the church that I'm talking about. It's the perspective of pro-life that they just baby killers and all this kind of stuff that it's like, I would rather the world know the church by what it's for, not what it's against.
Yeah.
And I would rather the world know that the church is for people. I mean, I want to say we're for the unborn baby, but we're also for the mom who may legally have that right to choose. And I'm not going to shame her or condemn her. I love what it says in John chapter 3, that Jesus didn't come into the world to condemn the world,
but to save.
And it's like, okay, if that's his perspective when he was in here, then maybe my perspective is I'm not here to condemn you, but I'm here to love the person and the mom. And there are some really good organizations, and we support them that come in and they offer free ultrasounds, and they offer diapers, and we've done that. We've done bottle drives, and we've done things like that as a church to help the moms that choose to keep the baby and carry the baby. Because I agree with you, we need to come around. I think as a society, the holistic, we need to come around and do as much as we can to help them. I mean, I think it's like, if they have the choice to abort, but they also know that if you're a single mom,
they have a tribe around them.
But a lot of them aren't. A lot of them don't. Let's be honest. Okay, you could be a teenager that you don't have a faith community. You maybe didn't have a parent or both parents that were really present. I'm just saying, you're living in poverty. You're okay. Then can we, as a society, say, hey, at least information to go, if you want to get an abortion, you have that right up to this point, maybe. But please know that if you don't get an abortion, this program, this exists. We're going to help you bring this child to, you know what I mean? So if you're under $30,000, you know what I mean? And you have 2 kids and you're this and that, this is available. We've got all of these programs. And like, why? I think the church helped do that, but maybe we could address this matter, maybe the government. Again, this is to me kind of coming together and trying to bring real solutions that I know don't make anyone, like, it's all or nothing. That's the problem. On both sides, we're all or nothing. And I'm pulling my personal convictions aside to say, I'd rather come to the middle and go, can we make it like, so Bill Clinton said, it's safe, and it's rare. And if it isn't, then they know they have options, that there is support. There's financial support, there's program, there's things like that. It's not just like here and there, but actual would help them. Like, hey, there's support where it's like, you're not going to be stuck with a $30,000 medical bill that you can't afford. You're not going to, you know what I mean? That there's food, there's formula, there's things like this. They're going to help you in a program when you're under a certain income, when you're, that doesn't exist. I mean, when you go look at some of the bills that they have talked about when they balance the budget, and you look at how much money we send to nations all over the world that you had no idea, and we're spending $2 billion to that one and this one and this one, and you're going, where do we send like, you tell me we can't figure out how to take care of,
Well, I think just we're trying to learn how to have an intelligent conversation and how to be salt and light in the current world. And I just, because I know the you know, I say this graciously, but I know how polarized all of us at times can think.
Yeah.
And so I just want to follow up, even for some of the things we've said, to just, especially from the people that we're trying to make room for this conversation to be for everybody.
Yeah.
But especially people that go to our church, part of Faith Framework. I would ask for graciousness, not to draw conclusions where we're just asking questions.
Yep.
We're trying to have a societal level.
It's nice that you say that. Most
conversation.
people don't do that anyways.
Yes. Yes.
We're saying it anyways.
Right,
but
we're
you're
saying
probably-
anyways.
You get ticked off because it's like
Yes.
we're not trying to.
We all three of us, I'm gonna speak for all three of us, are fighting for life.
Yeah.
I mean, from the very beginning, we are fighting for life.
the mother's life, the baby's life.
The mother's life, the baby's life, all
Yes.
we all
For
three are
you.
fighting for life. And Psalm 139 says we were fearfully
Wonderfully
and wonderfully made, knit together intimately in our mother's womb. And I believe that for the three of us. I believe that for every unborn child. I believe that for everybody listening. Interestingly, Erwin McManus says that a leader that we follow a lot says that life does not begin at conception. It begins earlier in the imagination of God.
Yeah.
And
That would make birth control
boy.
a part of the problem.
so, well, no, he's,
I
no,
know.
he's
I know.
actually against the Catholic view. But his
Yeah.
whole idea was for every person that is conceived,
Yeah.
you were physically conceived because you were first
Imagined.
and mentally conceived in the mind of Almighty God. And let that, wherever you're at listening or watching, breathe value into your soul.
Right.
And let that also bring, we believe that God is a God that specializes in redemption. That's one of his brand marks, his
Yep.
themes is he takes the ugliest moments of our lives and has a way of not just healing, but actually bringing beauty
Yeah.
and value and using it.
Yeah.
And I just, for anybody listening, whether you've never had an abortion, thought about abortion, whether you're a guy, a girl, a man or woman, or you've had 37 abortions,
Or 210.
or 210, the gospel means good news. And the good news of Jesus is no matter how dark your past, it's not bigger than God's love and ability when we come to him and give our lives to him. And I'm getting spiritual for a moment. But when we repent of wrongs and we give our lives fully to God, all our broken pieces, all of our deepest regrets, all the most horrible scars that we've had done to us or that we've done to us,
Right.
can all find a beautiful tapestry in God's hands. And he has a way to, David Crowder has that song, there is no, earth has no sorrow that heaven cannot heal. And we know that. And I've just seen too many redemption stories of people that have been through this or worse. And
And we also don't know that every life that God imagined that has been aborted, that God ultimately redeems with him for eternity.
absolutely.
And so, it doesn't mean it's, in my mind, good,
Yeah.
but that's part of that redemption story is like how many of those 60-some million lives that have been lost over the last 50 years are with him in eternity. And it was
Yeah.
the life that he imagined,
Yeah.
even if it didn't get to live it
Yeah.
Right.
here on earth. I mean,
Yeah.
I that's a hopeful thing
Yeah.
that I have
Yep,
in
absolutely.
me
Yep.
about,
Yeah.
That's
life. And so
It is.
Yeah.
It is.
Good.
Eternity is a perspective that we don't let color our filter enough.
yeah.
I mean, the cross is the picture that the darkest day
Amen.
Yeah.
can give way into a beautiful future.
So
And
good.
so wherever you're watching from, and whatever you've been through, whatever you've done, however this conversation hits you or even upsets you, we're posturing love and grace your way.
Yeah.
And our heart is for all people. Our heart's for you. Whether you agree with us, disagree with us, even just we process. We've not laid out conclusions.
No,
We tried
I
not
don't
to.
have
I
it.
don't think we really took a
I don't-
side, to be honest.
Yeah.
Like,
I'm for life and I'm for people,
Yeah.
and we're in a messy situation on
we're
a
just gonna
broken
start
planet.
A third platform.
Yeah.
What are we calling
There's
it?
nobody in it, but it's just
Yeah.
us.
Yeah.
No, I feel like
There's a lot of
people.
There's a lot of I know.
Yeah.
It's too political. We can't get it to
Right.
happen. I wish we could, but
right.
Thank you if you've
If you're
hung
still
around with
tuning
us.
in.
You're
Yeah.
still here.
Don't
Thanks for
don't
being on here,
Appreciate you.
Morgan.
don't cancel
Oh,
us. But
thanks for
right.
having me.
Yeah. Thank
we
you.
wanted to- we
Thanks.
thought it would be important to have a woman's perspective on here, and so thank you for coming
Yeah.
and sharing your thoughts. It's not easy to have a conversation about this.
No.
So
it's
thank
not.
you.
Well,
Yeah.
you're welcome. Thanks for having me.
Yeah,
This was
absolutely.
fun. next time you have another deep,
Yeah.
really
Amber
It's either-
Heard, or they like every
It's
time
either
I see-
Johnny Depp or Roe v.
Johnny
Wade.
Depp, Roe v. Wade,
So,
sorry.
yeah.
the important things.
Yeah,
right.
That are happening. I'm here for you.
Cool.
Well, we appreciate your mind and your perspective.
Yeah.
And hope you have a good rest of the week. We'll see you next time.